All right. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tyler Lakaitis, and I'm the project manager for this week's assignment. Today, I'll be going through our approach for selecting our optimal vessel configuration using our structured evaluation process. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge our team members who contributed to this project. Each of us took a different approach to building our selection matrices, and I'll be presenting our finalized version that incorporates all of our key elements from our work. All right, so the purpose of this week's project was to respond to a request for information or request for proposal from the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department for a small powerboat suitable for conducting marine research. As part of this process, we were tasked with performing all the necessary project activities to select, construct, and modify a vessel configuration that meets the operational needs while balancing cost, performance, and feasibility. Since none of us are industry experts in marine architecture, we had to do a bunch of research to determine material and labor costs as well as expected performance characteristics of each different vessel configuration. Each vessel option varied in size, hull material, number of engines, and cabin coverage. Uh, all of these impacted construction costs, operating costs, speed, and work conditions suitably. To ensure a structured selection process, we developed a vessel selection matrix that systematically evaluated all 24 possible configurations based on the four key factors: construction cost, operating cost, speed, and working conditions. The following matrix ensures an objective data driven decision, allowing us to compare trade offs between cost effectiveness, operational efficiency, and environmental suitability. The final vessel selection will be based on weighted scoring, uh, constraint evaluations, and group input to determine the best option for the project's needs. So our process was conducted over the following five steps. Step one was to define the vessel configuration. We mapped out all 24 possible configurations for the vessel based on size, material type, engine numbers, and cabin coverage style. Next, we evaluated, identified rather, our evaluation factors. We focused on cost, speed, and environmental suitability as the most critical factors. After that, we applied our constraints. So any vessel that failed a key requirement was penalized using a zero multiplier in its final score. After that, we normalized all of the scores. Each factor was scaled using a 1 to 10 normalization method that ensured consistent comparison across the different units. Lastly, we applied our weights and computed the final score. The weights were assigned based on perceived importance, which allowed us to determine the best vessel based on performance and cost metrics. And by following this structured approach, we ensured that the vessel selection was objective, logical, and justifiable. Okay. Next, I'll go into the evaluation factors that we used during this project. To evaluate the 24 different vessels, multipliers were applied to a base cost instead of using absolute values. This scales cost with this scaled the cost, speed, and work conditions logically without needing exact prices for everything. The construction and operating costs were adjusted using the size, material type, engine numbers, and cabin multipliers. The speed factors were based on an SLR-based single diesel being a 2 and twin diesel being a 4. We found an equation online that allowed us to estimate the maximum speed for the different vessel sizes. Work condition factors, the multipliers and scaling factors were selected based on the vessel sizes, Larger sizes, aluminum hulls, and enclosed cabins scored higher in those categories. The final constraints, the minimum speed of 20 knots was given. Maximum cost, maximum operating cost, and minimum working conditions were determined based on our market research. This section is where the majority of our research was conducted. Everything that we researched informed our choices for the base values, the maximum limits, and the scaling factors to help better ensure a realistic evaluation model. Next, we'll go into our constraint and weights. Each configuration was calculated using the corresponding formulas here at the top that reflect the cost, speed, and working conditions. The results are then compared against our constraint values calculated earlier to determine if the vessel met the minimum acceptable thresholds for that category. The factor weights were determined based on perceived importance across the entire group. No single configuration excelled in every category, so that meant that trade-offs were necessary in selecting the final vessel. The weighting system ensured that even if a vessel performs poorly in one category, it can still be competitive if it outperforms in other categories. Okay, so we'll talk about the scores and results here. The factor scores were calculated using a normalization method. So basically, we took the best performing vessel in each category and gave it a 10, and the worst vessel got a 1, and all the other 23 or 22 vessels were scaled proportionally between those values. And then the final score was calculated using the given formula in the project. Doing it this way ensures that any vessel failing a hard constraint was adequately penalized, and viable vessels were still ranked based on performance-weighted scores. Okay, I'll talk about our highest scoring configuration. Once the project was complete, we found that the vessel configuration number 18 was our highest scoring configuration with a final score of 7.89. It ended up being 38 feet, a fiberglass hull, a single diesel engine, and a 3/4 cabin coverage. So this vessel excelled in 3 out of 4 of the factor categories. Although it did underperform in the speed constraint, only reaching 11.7 estimated knots out of the 20 sustained knots. It was significantly cheaper to construct and maintain than the other vessels. And based on our assigned factor weights, we determined that construction cost was almost half of the weight, and operational cost was a quarter of the weight. Speed only ended up being 15% of the entire weighted score. So that could be why a majority of the reason why this vessel excelled amongst the others. Okay, that would be the end of our project for this week. Thank you for listening. Our backup slides just include references for our market research for the costs. Thank you.